Hello everyone and welcome to this, my first of two videos on the Canon T60. Not actually a Canon T-series camera, it's really a Cosina C1 with a Canon mount on it and automatic shooting. We're going to talk about all of that as we go through this camera and how to use it. This first video is going to cover what everything on the camera is. The second video will cover what everything does and how it affects your photography. So first up, the Canon T60 is a 35mm interchangeable lens SLR. What does that mean? Well, it means it can take any 35mm film, just like this, that the lenses on it can be removed and a different one can be put on at any point when you're not taking a photo without damaging your film, rather like this, that it uses a single lens. The light that passes through the lens goes to this mirror, and from the mirror goes up to the reflex housing here and out to your viewfinder eyepiece on the back of the camera so that you can see what the camera sees and figure out what your photo is going to look like. It has shutter speeds of 1 second to 1/1000th of a second, as well as bulb auto exposure, which is aperture priority. We'll talk about that in the second video, and lock, which is what you would use so that the camera can't actually accidentally take a photo when you don't want it to. And these are all up here. The viewfinder itself is on the back of the camera. It has 0.86x magnification and 93% frame coverage. What does that mean? It means that what you see in the viewfinder here is 86% of the size of what will be on the film. That's a bit of a reduction, so it will be it'll be okay for manual focus. It's not the best spec, but it will make manually focusing lenses a little bit more challenging than something, say, with a 95 or 96% magnification. The 93% frame coverage means that if you assume that what you're looking at right now is what will be on your film, then 7%, about 3.5% on each side and 3.5% on the top and bottom, will be on your film, but not in your viewfinder. So that means you have a little bit of room to crop your final image when you get it back if there was a slight misalignment or something like that. It has a fixed focusing screen with a split prism on it, and in the second video we'll see that and I'll discuss how to use it for your photography. The flash sync speed on this camera is 1/60th of a second, which we know because the 1/60th right here is marked with a flash symbol. It's based on the Cosina C1 chassis, which is the exact same chassis that was used for cameras like the Phoenix P1, the Olympus OM2000, and the Nikon FM10. And this was also the last Canon branded manual focus camera, the last FD-mount camera, and the last camera from the T lineup, even though it wasn't actually made by Canon. The Canon T60 is aimed at the entry-level user, and we know that because it's a Cosina camera. Its feature set is very much geared at students. The Cosina C1 and CT1 cameras were intended to be student-focused cameras, built with known technologies and features, all kinds of things that would be cutting edge 30 years before this was made. So this is a camera that's based on known and understood camera building methods and concepts. It's still a highly capable camera, and it can still do about 99% of what most anybody would want a camera to do photographically, so there's nothing wrong with this camera, and it is quite a good first camera or quite a good general shooting, lightweight, hiking type camera as well. It's also an ideal backup body for high-risk areas, which would be like beaches. I know that doesn't sound high risk, but there's a lot of sand there and it could get into a camera and ruin it. For FD users who would want to take a camera to a place where it could get damaged or ruined, this is one of the least expensive options you can get for that. This was made by Cosina in Nakano, Japan in 1990. Now, if you have your Canon T60, we're going to start going over what everything on the camera is, starting here on the top, though technically on the fronts, with strap lugs. If you're missing strap lugs like I am, just a couple of split rings in here, we'll go right into the strap lugs, and that's where you would connect your camera strap. This is the film rewind knob and lever, and also the film back release. Around it is the the film speed selection dial, flash hot shoe, shutter speed index, shutter speed dial right here that you can use to select your shutter speed, shutter release button, film advance lever, film frame count window right here. Okay, so looking at the front of the camera, we have a few things. Make Canon model T60, self-timer light and button, I'll show you that in just a second, lens mounting index and lens flange up here. For the self-timer, what you want to do is just push it down and it will blink. And when it's done blinking, it will take a photo. It will work in both manual shooting and fully automatic, aperture priority shooting. Those different shooting modes we're going to talk about in the second video. On the back of the camera, there's not a whole lot to see. This is your film type window. When you load film into the camera, you will be able to see some information on the cassette that tells you the type, frames, speed, things like that through this window. Viewfinder right here, this is what you would look through to compose your image. And on the sides of the viewfinder, you can see a couple of grooves that you can use to put something like an eye cup onto your camera. Bottom of the camera also doesn't have a whole lot. Here we have the film rewind release button. We'll see that in the second video. Serial number, made in Japan, tripod socket, and your battery cap right here for your battery chamber. I'll show you in the second video how to replace batteries. To get into the camera's back and where the film is loaded, you simply lift up this knob and pull it until the back pops open. And now we can get into the camera. This is the film cassette chamber, which is where we'll put film in the second video. This is the shutter area, where this is the shutter that will open to expose the film to light for a photo. There are some film guide rails that are molded into the plastic body of this camera. These two on the outside help keep the film from moving up and down as it travels through the camera. These two on the inside, which are a little bit hard to see, rest up against the film pressure plate here that we'll see in a second to keep the film flat so that the light coming from the lens is properly focused on it. Here we have the film tension sprocket, and what that does, when the film is advanced, it spins just like this. It can only spin in this direction. It cannot spin in that direction unless we press the film rewind button, and now it spins freely. So the job of this guy right here is when the film is advanced to pull it through the camera in an even motion that keeps it properly aligned, and to prevent it from being pulled backwards by the memory that builds up in film as it's been stored inside of a cassette for who knows however long, because that basically turns the cassette into like a spring. Film take-up spool rather. The film gets taken up on here as it goes through the camera. On the back of the camera's door, we have the film pressure plate that keeps the film flat and properly aligned for photography. And then this little foam seal gasket around the film window so that your film isn't ruined by light coming in through that window. I do have some tips for you on how to use the Canon T60. The first one is that good batteries are required for shutter and meter operation. This camera can do nothing whatsoever without good batteries, and we'll talk about the batteries in the second video. The next one is that it can use FD and FDN lenses. FD lenses, this is a third-party lens, but generally they have a silver ring that rotates on the back here. This is an FD lens, okay? So it's got a silver ring, and that silver ring rotates to mount the lens on the camera. FDN lenses look like this. They have an all-black ring with a silver button, and the whole lens rotates when you mount it on the camera. So this can take either of those. It cannot take FL lenses. I don't have an FL lens to show you, but an FL lens looks kind of like the FD with the silver ring and then the aperture ring to control the apertures at the front of those. This camera cannot use FL lenses. This also, because of the size and the weight, it's perfect for taking on vacations, for hiking with, any place where it could theoretically be stolen, dropped, damaged, things like that. They're also relatively inexpensive for Canon FD and FDN mount users who enjoy taking their cameras into places where they could be damaged. And it's also an ideal first camera, and it's capable enough that most photographers who get this will be quite happy with it for as long as they want to shoot film. So it's a good first camera. It's also a good only film camera because it can do most anything you would want it to do. It's not missing any major features that would prevent you from taking photos. Some things not to do with your camera. Don't store it with the shutter ready to fire. Anytime you're done with it for the day, trigger your shutter. The reason is because the mechanical components in there include some springs and such, and when they have tension on them, they can develop fatigue over the years if they're just left there for a period of time, which can alter your shutter timing, or theoretically they could break and brick your camera. You don't want that. Don't touch the shutter in the camera. Your finger oils can damage the leaves and cause them to get sticky, or you can push on the shutter, cause the leaves to skip their tracks, get jammed, and ruin your shutter that way. Also, don't touch the mirror behind the lens because your finger oils can tarnish the mirror and affect your metering and your ability to focus. Don't leave your camera or lenses in your car. There's a few reasons. Obviously, theft. You don't want all of this to get stolen. The next one is the heat will damage the plastic. If it gets really, really hot in your car, which they can do, the heat could damage the plastic. It can also cause the lubricating oils in the lens and camera to get very thin, and then they flow to places that they shouldn't be through capillary action. When they get back to their normal temperature and viscosity, they're not where they should be, and they can cause the camera and lens not to work properly. Likewise, an extreme cold, which can damage the plastic, that can also cause the lubricating oils to get very thick and gummy and break down, and that can cause them to be ruined, so you don't want that. Don't store your camera in a plastic bag or box, because plastic is moisture permeable, and once moisture gets into it, it will come to rest either on your lens elements or in your camera, which can cause fungus to grow in your lenses, and that can affect your image quality, or it can get into your camera. This probably won't get mildewy, but you can get fungus in your prism, which can affect your ability to focus your camera. Don't let your camera get wet, because if it gets wet, the electronics in this can short out, and that can ruin your camera. Also, if it gets dust in it, like at the beach or sand, because this isn't weather sealed, that can happen. That dust or debris can cause your gearing mechanisms to not work properly, just to be aware of it. And lastly, just remember that your Canon T60 is a precision tool that should be handled with care and respect. As long as you take care of your camera will take care of you. So that's everything with the first video. If you go and check out the second video, then you'll be able to see how to use all of the features on this camera to affect your photography. See you guys there.